This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares, and we're delighted you're here. Broadcasting 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains, right here from the farm. And John is engineering the broadcast at GCN. Thank you so much, John. And if you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. And if you'd like to take us with you as you travel, we have a listen line, 605-477-3249, 605-477-3249. And there's a link to your instructors on the website, usaprepares.com. With us this morning is Mike Nocks. Mike Nocks is a founder of White Harvest Seed, whiteharvestseed.com, and we're going to be talking about garden preparation for the next season. We're going to be talking about how to make your garden grow really well, organic fungicides, watering temperatures, does it make a difference? We'll be talking about growing some plants indoors during the winter, herbs and spices and so forth, and wood ashes and what to grow and why. Welcome, Mike Nocks.
Hey, Vincent. How are you? Good man?
I'm doing well. You know, Mike, you and I had a couple seconds to chat on the phone yesterday, and you travel throughout the country teaching gardening classes in person at preparedness expos. And you got one coming up soon?
Yeah, we're actually going to be in the St. Louis area. Actually, it's the St. Charles is the actual town. It's the Gateway Preparedness Expo that's coming up there this weekend, as a matter of fact, there. So, yeah, we'll be there. Come by and see us if you're in that area.
Gateway Preparedness Expo and St. Charles, that's this weekend. And are you planning to go to Kansas City at the end of, the beginning of next month, October 1 and 2? The
RK show? No, we've got a scheduling conflict. We won't be able to be there, but we will be at the Mother Earth News Fair in Topeka, Kansas, and I think it's like the 23rd or 24th of October when we will be there, and that is a really good show for the self-sustainability people that like that type of thing.
Yeah, I've been there as well, and you're absolutely right. Well, that's great. That's great. So, do you have a schedule that you publish of where you're going to be? So if our class wants to meet
If they go to our website, which is whiteharvestseed.com, go to the link underneath there that has our schedule, and it will have all the things that we are invited to and that we go to and everything. And sometimes you need to check regularly because some things come up spur of the moment that we go to. So just check it out, whiteharvestseed.com.
Yep, and I'm there right now. Mike, it's great to have you on the air with us. I wanted to share something with you. I've been traveling on farm adventures, and I've been to some stores as I travel to pick up parts that I need, like when I run over a great big tire tread and it wipes out the lights on our trailer, I pop into the Chinese factory outlet. And what I've seen, I'm sure you've seen the same things as you travel and pull your trailer, all this debris in the road. Well, I've noticed that people look a lot more unhealthy than ever before, and I have a feeling it has to do with not eating the kind of food that the Nocks family eats. You think so?
Well, that's something that you see our society as a whole, and you see everything's all fast food and, eat this quick and so I can be on the road, and a lot of those type of foods, of course, do not pertain to a healthy lifestyle and healthy, just overall good health. I have to be honest, sometimes we are caught up in that trap too, but we try to eat as healthy as we can. And, that's why we work really hard at growing our own food sources. And, there are a lot of good resources out there for people to tap into to grow, healthy stuff, instead of grabbing something high in sugar or salt or whatever, grab you some good grain mix or, granola type mixes type stuff when you're on the road. And those are just as filling and good too. But I agree with you. It's a feed me quick mentality in the United States anymore.
Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about Dr. Norman Shealy. He told me on air, he's a friend of yours as well. He mentioned to me that, when he sees a fast food place, he just keeps going, even if he's hungry. And for years, I've done my best to do that as well. Sometimes I'll stop into the Arches and get a cup of coffee if that's the only place around. But other than that, get a cup of coffee and keep going.
Well, it's interesting, a lot of these fast food places, like you mentioned, McDonald's or Hardee's, those type of things, you've seen their menus change. McDonald's actually is making a big push on all this natural beef and, all this type of stuff. So they're seeing that that's what people are wanting as a whole. So they're changing some of their menus items.
Yeah. I stopped at a gas station and it was attached to a McDonald's as I was traveling, I think, toward the East Coast. And there was this very large girl there, and she was a young girl. She was probably in her 20s, but she was very, very large. And I said, I walked in the door. She gave me this great big smile and said, hi. And I said, so how am I doing? I said, great. And I said, so do you eat here? And the guy I was with was laughing, and another guy who was waiting at the counter was laughing because they kind of knew what I was right. saying. And I said, so how's the food here? She says, great. I said, it tastes really good. And I said, okay, I'm glad to know that.
Yeah, it'd be a bad thing if she said it was not very good. You'd want to a good scenario there.
Yeah, but I was looking at a Petri dish, and I was seeing what happens when you work there and you eat a lot there. So, Mike, we have a neighbor who is a wonderful, wonderful gardener, and he's been to our expo, and he does something that very few of us do. Maybe you do this, but I don't have the ability to do this. He has a pond that is above his garden. It's just the way his land works in the Ozarks. So he has this pond, and he lets runoff enter his pond, and then he has a water line that is attached to his pond, and gravity flows downhill into his garden. So when he waters his garden, it's pond water, it's brownish, sometimes it has algae on top, whatever is growing in this pond that's undisturbed other than taking water and watering his garden. His garden is magnificent. So here's one of the questions. Water temperature. Does that matter? Because when I water the garden, I think I'm shocking the plants with 65-degree well water versus, the outside temperature of the garden, which might be 80 degrees, 90 degrees, during the summer, maybe even warmer. Do I shock the plants, and is it bad for them? And is he doing the right thing, and am I not doing the right thing?
Well, he's blessed for sure to be able to have that set up, because he's getting all the nutrients from, the fish and all the microbes and all that type of stuff that's working in the pond. So, yeah, he's got a great scenario. The one factor that might be an issue for him if he's in a situation where, he has maybe other farmers around him that are spraying chemicals on their property and it's running off into his pond, that's going to get in his water supply too. But it sounds like since his garden's doing well, that must not be an issue. But to your original question, soil temperature, I'm going to maybe kind of a roundabout way to get to your answer, but the soil temperature is very important in plants. Every vegetable has its own preference that it likes to be planted in, the soil temps. And when soil temps are, after coming out of winter, in the early spring, the soils are cooler than the air temperatures. You can have short sleeves on and shorts on, sometimes in the spring after it's been through a cool snap, and then it turns, 75 or 80 degrees, but the soil is still cool. So to get to your answer, that I think there is some possible truth to that, and that's why most people, most gardeners, and most gardening experts per se would say either water early in the morning or early evening. Don't do it during the heat of the day, that's for sure. Because then, like you said, if it's a 90-degree day and you're spraying 65-degree water temp, that's a 25, 30-degree temperature swing. And it is some situations there also when the water gets on the leaves, and if the sun comes out on a blistering day, you can get some sun scald and problems with your leaves and on your fruits. So yeah, there is an element of that, when there's some extreme temperatures. But for the most part, 55, 65-degree water coming out of your ground is not going to do too much damage unless it's just those blistering hot days, which we've had, in Missouri this year.
We have. I know Dr. Joel Wallach. He's been to our meetups. He's been to the expos, and he talks about wood ashes and how important wood ashes are to a garden. We heat our home with an outdoor wood furnace, so we've got a pile of wood ashes, and we have this cyclone spreader. It goes on the back of a tractor. It probably holds 500 pounds, and we can sprinkle that around our lawn if we have, plenty, or we can sprinkle it in the fields, and we can put some in the garden. What are your thoughts about adding wood ashes? And I'm not talking about burning pressure-treated, wood. I'm not talking about anything other than wood that you might pick up that is unenhanced by chemicals, just limbs that fall down and that kind of thing that you throw in a wood fire and keep the ashes. What do you think about that, Mike?
Man, that's a great question also. Wood ash is a definite very good supplier of potassium. And potassium is one of the big three chemical elements that plants need, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, NPK, and K being the potassium. Wood ashes is a definite plus because you're adding that into the soil. It also helps loosen it up just a little bit, and it's increasing, or actually, it is actually improving improving acidity in your soil. So if you have a soil that struggles with staying in the proper pH level, and that's generally 6.8 to 7.2 on a scale of 0 to 14. And so, wood ashes are great. You don't want to just only do that, though. If that's the only fertilizer element or the chemical element that you're putting in, you're going to have to offset that with something else, too. So just remember that. Just don't overdo it, but it's definitely a good source.
So, Mike, when we come back, I'll describe the size of our garden, 4 feet by, let's say, 16 feet, 2 blocks high. How much ashes should we put in? Mike Nocks, White Harvest Seed. We'll be right back. Class Mike Nocks is with us, whiteharvestseed.com. And how do I know Mike Nocks? Well, I met him many, many years ago when he first got started, and he joined our faculty, was on the air with us, and where do I buy our seeds? White Harvest Seed. Seriously, because they grow. They grow, and Mike provides us the advice and counsel that we'd like to have in order to have a successful garden. So, Mike, our gardens are typically in our backyard. They are mostly raised beds, 4 feet wide, inside dimensions, 4 feet wide, 16 feet long, and they're 2 concrete blocks high. And how much wood ash should we put in annually, or how much should we use to start with, and should we top it off, annually or twice a year? What do you recommend?
Well, I was going to also mention for the break that, wood ashes sometimes can, on very sensitive plants, they can have some negative effects. It can burn them too. So whatever amount you put on is important. Kind of the rough rule of thumb, it's going to depend on your soil that you're putting it in, and in your situation with the raised beds, you're controlling the soil that you have in there, so it's not, real clayey or real sandy per se. But the rough rule of thumb is anywhere for per 100 square feet area is anywhere between 3 and 10 pounds of wood ash, depending on that soil texture. If it's in your situation, since you got 4 by 16 is about 64 square feet, so figure about half of that. So I'd say anywhere from 3 to 5 pounds in one of those beds would be fine and spread out. But you definitely want to do it in the fall. early fall like this time of year or through the winter, early winter, because it takes a little bit of time for that wood ash to decompose or break down into the soil nutrients. So definitely don't just put it on, right in the beginning of the year when you're getting ready to plant, or during the year when your plants are growing, because you probably will have some negative effect. You want it to work in. So, and that's where those soil tests come into play that you can buy from your local nursery or seed supplier, or you can get it from tests done by your county agent, the conservation agents and those type of things, and they give you a rounded report, because that's really what I would probably recommend for most folks, especially this time of year, to get your soil tested to find out what it's low on, because your plants that you've grown this year have eaten up everything that you had at the beginning of the year. So what you were high on early, you may be completely out of now in your soil. So a soil test I'd recommend. That way you can go about correcting it with what the things you need to add.
Mike, one of the things I looked up on the internet years ago was soil test kits. And you can spend very little money, or you can spend hundreds of dollars on your own soil test kits. And what I ended up doing is I bought some test strips on eBay, and I just put the test strip in damp soil, and I pull it out a little bit later, and a couple seconds later, and read what the pH is. But that's the only thing that I'm measuring as a quick and dirty test. Do you think that that's okay, or am I just wasting my time?
No, that's not. It's not a waste of time. You're just not getting the full story. Right. pH is a very important level to monitor through your garden. And like I said, most plants, when you look at them, they all have their own little preferences. But between 6.8 and 7.2 is the ideal pH range. But some plants, like corn per se, they like nitrogen, higher nitrogen level soils. So if you do a test and you're just doing pH, that's not going to tell you anything about nitrogen. Just as well as, if something needs a little bit more acid. For example, onions. If you want sweet onions, you don't want to have a soil that's high in sulfur. So if you don't have the test that tells you if there's how much sulfur's in your ground, you may just be planting your onion seed in a soil area that's not going to do anything for you. So the soil tests are important. And, and what I always tell folks when we're at shows and things, is don't just go out and, if you say you have a 10 by 10 garden or a 10 by 20 foot garden, don't just go out in the middle of the garden and think that's the whole, when you do your test from there, that's going to be the good representation of everything. You need to do 3 or 4 different tests in different areas, because what's high in one area or low, it could be totally different just 3 or 4 feet away. So get a well-rounded test. We sell these little test kits that do the NPK, the 3 big fertilizer elements, and the pH levels. But the county cooperative agencies, those they do a big, well-rounded test.
When we come back, Mike, tell us about your test kit, please, and what it costs and how we get it. That'd be great to know. Mike Nocks, whiteharvestseed.com. We'll be right back. Mike Nocks is with us. Mike, when I began farming, I learned early that we take soil samples from many locations throughout the fields that we're going to fertilize and lime. And so we would identify the fields as field number 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And then we would dig down about 6 inches, and we take a sample and put it into a clean plastic pail, and then we would mix all those samples that we've taken from around the fields together, and then combine them into one sample, and then have that tested. And that's exactly what you were talking about with a garden sample for testing the soil. So please tell us about your soil test kit. How does it work, and what does it cost?
Oh, they're really economical. We have 2 different sizes. We have one that does 10 tests, and then we have one that does 40 tests. And each one of them will do tests for pH, nitrogen, potash, or potassium, and phosphorus. And all you simply do is you take a little. There's a little. Each test has a little glass vial per se, and you just put a little bit of dirt in there with a little water, and you break open one of the little color-coded tablets and mix in with that, shake it up, and then whatever color it comes back, you just compare it to the color chart, and that's what it will tell you whether you're high or low or what you need to do. So yeah, they're very simple to do for the average home gardener to get a good all-round beginning test result. And the prices,
Doctor,
I think the 10 test is $6, and the 40 test kit is $13.50. So, and I think most of the conservation places that you take it to, I've heard anywhere, some places, depending on what county you live in your state, it can be free, it can be $15, or it can be 25 or 30. So it just varies depending on the agency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's $5 in our county, or at least in our little hamlet up the road from you. And Mike, you and I are about maybe 20 miles apart, and our farms are about 20 miles apart. So we're neighbors.
Sure.
Mike, leaves. What I do is, when I first started our raised bed garden, we went out into the woods and got some dried leaves that had been there for a couple of years and put them on a tarp and dragged them over to the garden and rototilled them in. That's how we added some lime, and we added some wood ashes, as we talked about before. And we rototilled all that in, and also we added peat moss. Do you think that is an okay way to go, or is there a better way?
Oh my, yeah, leaves are awesome. If you're fortunate in your location to have a little bit of timber or access to a little bit of timber groves, type thing, yeah, leaf mold, leaves, they kind of the rough rule that I've heard and researched is that leaves, when they're chopped up and you use them as a compost, they'll provide 80% of your nutrients and minerals, trace minerals that your plants and gardens just live for. So yeah, but the key is don't just go out and get a bunch of leaves and just throw them on your garden. You want to chop them up. You want to run them through your lawnmower or leaf shredder or whatever you may have, because the smaller you get the leaf particles, the better it'll break down and won't just be a slimy mess and in the spring. So yeah, leaves are great. And like I said, if you have a timber stand or access to it, my gosh, go out and dig up the leaf mold that's been there for years upon years upon years and broke down by bugs and microbes and all that type of stuff. And man, you throw that on your garden area, you're going to see some dramatic results. You really will.
Mm-hmm. Now, we heat with wood, as we mentioned, and a lot of times we use a chainsaw in the same place. So we have these logs and cut them up, and we have sawdust. Now, is sawdust good or bad for gardens? Because I've heard both, Mike, and I don't know the answer.
Well, from my experience, when we first moved down here, the soil that we had kind of a raised bedish type area that we also had we were working into trying to work the soil up, like since you said, like we're neighbors and everything, the rock down here are pretty rough in Missouri. So we added a bunch of sawdust to our area, lots. And the rough rule of thumb is it's one of those things you don't want to overdo it. It's kind of like the wood ashes. Sawdust, especially fresh sawdust, will rob the nitrogen out of the soil. It just kind of is like a sponge. And you want nitrogen in your soil, of course. And, you have to replace that nitrogen, add to that every year. So if you put in a bunch of sawdust, you're robbing your soil of the nitrogen. But if you have some aged sawdust that you've had around or had in your compost pile, you can add that, but just don't go crazy. Like I said, you want to have a good mixture of compost elements, and sawdust is one of many that you can put in. I worked with a guy many years ago, Mel Bartholomew, is kind of the guy that originated the square foot gardening technique, and his mixture of his soil mix, especially in raised beds, was one of the three elements was 5 different composts that he mixed in with the other elements, and I think his other elements were vermiculite and peat moss. But that mixing up the variety of the compost side is going to give you the more balance of minerals. If you just put sawdust on your garden, you're going to struggle in some other areas on the nutrient level.
Mm-hmm. And what about different kinds of woods? For example, on our farm we have black walnuts, and I've heard that if you have a black walnut tree near where you're trying to grow a garden, it just flat out won't grow. Have you experienced that as well?
Yes and no. For me personally, I have one of our gardens is right directly underneath a walnut tree that is just due to where we put it and where we had the space to do the garden. And I've noticed over the years some things don't do well there, and some things do okay. But there is truth to the if you're surrounded by a lot of walnuts and it's the roots give off some type of element, chemical element, nutrient element that is not really great for good garden growing. So there is an element of that. If you can avoid it, definitely do it. But sometimes people are limited in their yards and spaces, and they don't have any other option. If you don't have an option to plant in the ground, I would do what you do, and what we do also is the raised bed, and then that's not really an issue because you're not into the ground where the roots and stuff are, or containers.
We have I don't know if they came down in your neck of the Ozarks recently, but they had these the guys that trim the trees for the power lines. Mm-hmm. And did they come down your way recently?
They've been down within the past 6 months. They've got pretty much all our power lines up to snuff right now in our area, but they came down about 6 months ago. Well,
so what I did, Mike, was I went over to what looked like the lead pickup truck there, and what they were doing, they were cutting limbs so that they wouldn't touch the power lines, and they were grinding them up into wood chips. And so I went to the lead guy and I said, If you don't have a place for those, we'd love to have some of those on our farm. And he was going down our road the next couple of days. So they dropped them off, 3 loads of these wood chips. But they have no trouble disposing of them because it's like I had to get in line to get,
That's for sure. They're very popular when they come down the road.
Yeah, like everybody wants to be their friend. And so I was able to get the wood chips from right in front of our farm. So I think what they try to do is make it fair. So if they're cleaning up by your farm, then you get those wood chips,
right,
and so forth. And so what I did was I left them in a pile, and I plan on letting them decay into compost. Now, is that something that I should put into the soil in a couple years, or how long should I wait, or should I not do that, or should I use it as a mulch? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, in the green stage, like you probably saw that when they piled it up, it was giving off steam, so it's getting hot.
Yeah.
In the sense of it's doing its composting thing. I generally tell folks, and what I've done in the past is I just let it set a year, and it breaks down. The longer you let it set, of course, it turns into better compost. But we use a lot of mulch. We have a sawmill guy that's near us that we are good friends with, and he lets us come over and get some mulch really reasonable priced. And I use that in my gardens as a weed barrier. And then as the seasons go on, when I'm working the soil, whatever, it tills into the soil and works into the soil and eventually breaks down. And so, yeah, it's a great, if that's a avenue that you can get from in your area and for your gardener listeners, definitely. But like you said, they're very popular. You got to catch them quick when they're in your area.
Yeah. So when you put this sawdust down, we probably have the same friend that has a sawmill. And when you put the sawdust down, do you put that on top of your garden? Do you put that around the base to prevent the weeds from going up around the blocks? Do you do all of that?
Well, like I said, I use the mulch more from in our gardens. The research that I've done, like I said, too much sawdust will rob the nitrogen, but for some reason, mulch, in its bigger form, doesn't have that issue. And so I'll put down, layers in between the rows if it's in our row crop area. I usually don't use it in our raised beds whatsoever, but I use it keep the weeds down as a barrier for the most part. And put down 3, 4, 5 inches, whatever you can put down that's reasonable, and let that set in. And it breaks down. It takes a little bit longer to break down than sawdust. So you're going to have that, but the weed barrier is what I use mostly for in my gardens, and it does really well. Plus, it keeps the moisture in the ground during the hot seasons, which is what your plants need, because if your ground is exposed to the air and the sun, it dries out and cracks, and it just causes you major problems for the water side of gardening. So, yeah, I like mulch. I mean, if I had to go to the store at Walmart or whatever, and buy it at $4 a bag, I probably wouldn't be using it, because that's pretty too expensive for me.
Yeah, and we don't know what else is in there as well. I mean,
correct. Yeah, the mulch that I use is not treated or tinted, colored, or in any way. It's just the natural, straight off the tree that's been chopped off.
Okay. What about preparing our garden site for the next growing season? What do you recommend we do, like right this minute?
Well, like I said earlier, soil tests would be one thing that I would possibly consider doing, so that you know what you need to do.
Right.
But definitely clean up. Get your weeds pulled up, get the plants pulled up if they've died off, and if there's any of those plants or weeds and things that are diseased in any way, don't put those in your compost pile. And well, I hear the music, so I get to catch up on the backside of it.
Yeah. And let's talk about that compost pile when we come back. How do we make one? Is it just a heap, or do we use some kind of netting or fencing, or what do we do? We'll be right back. Mike Nocks, whiteharvestseed.com. Mike Nocks is with us, White Harvest Seed Company, whiteharvestseed.com, and there's a link on page 1, usaprepares.com, to White Harvest Seed. So if you're traveling and you can't write while you're traveling, just go to usaprepares.com, page number 1. Also, on the instructors tab of the website, link to Mike Nocks. Mike, making compost. How do you recommend that we set up a compost pile, compost container, so forth? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, there's multiple. I mean, it depends it all really boils down to how much you want to spend. If you want to buy the self-enclosed ones that you spin or have lids made out of plastic, those are going to be a little bit more on the higher side of things. Or you can just use straw bales or even wood pallets, to box it in and just pile it up inside. The key thing on compost is this, though. You want it to make it work properly. And what I mean by work is to heat up above that 160 degrees, which is what kills all the bacteria, diseases, and all that, and the weeds, that's weed seeds that are in that type of thing. And the way to do that is you got to have the proper mix between what they call brown and green, the carbon and the nitrogen. And essentially, and I always get this mixed up, but I think I've got it right here for your folks listening, is that you roughly want 30 parts of the carbon, which is the brown, mixed in with 1 part of the green, which is the nitrogen. Now, people always ask me, well, what's brown? What's green? Well, I can give you kind of a rough list. The browns are the source of carbon, are like straw, hay, corn stalks, bean vines, leaves, a little bit of wood shavings and sawdust. Those are the types of things that are considered carbon-based. And the green things are things, such as, grass clippings, your kitchen scraps off of your table. But one thing I want to make sure they understand is when you think of kitchen scraps, don't include your meat products or, meat bones or your meat fats. Those type of things, even though they do break down over time, they do not benefit the compost working at its most efficiently. Plus, it draws all your critters and stuff that are hungry for a chew on a bone or whatever too. So don't put those type of things in. And manures are considered a green product too. But don't use any manures such as dog or cat leftovers. You only use, your herbivores like your cows, your horses, and goats and rabbits. Rabbits is actually your best manure to use in your garden or any type of thing. It is very, very good potency, and goat manure also.
Mike, what I did was I bought what's called a cattle panel on them. I know you know what they are. They're about 50 inches high, and they're about 16 feet long. And they're a kind of a heavy wire fence. And I just made it into a circle. And
Perfect.
That's it. I tied the ends together with some metal wire and or iron wire or steel wire and galvanized. And so it's this round cylinder that's made out of a heavy fence. And we just throw the compost items in there, the potato peels, the banana skins, those kinds of things, plus a small amount of grass clippings, plus leaves and sawdust, and that's what we do. So are we on the right track based on what you said just a few minutes ago?
Perfect. The only thing with that type of setup is it's going to take longer to break down, which is, over a year, which is fine. And that's what you never can have enough compost. So having one of those type of bins set up is awesome. To get, if you have the proper ratios of what I described, and you have it, and you keep it stirred up, and you're monitoring it and adding water on a regular basis, those type of things, you can have good compost within 21 to 30 days. But the way you're describing it is a good way to do it, to have as a resource for you down the road in a year from now. And if you keep doing it as a regular cycle, you always have compost available for you for your starting plants and putting in getting your plants off to a good start. So yeah, definitely that'll work.
Mike Nocks, thanks so much for being with us in class. If you go to whiteharvestseed.com, there's a resource tab on the website, and it will teach you very, very quickly how to grow some of your favorite plants. And so I'm looking at how to grow tomatoes, and it talks about how to plant them, how to harvest them, how to save the seeds, common problems, and suggested companions. What's better than that? It's all right there. whiteharvestseed.com. Mike Nocks, thanks so much for being with us, and have a great show this weekend. I'm looking forward to seeing you on the road.
Thanks. My pleasure. Thanks, Vinny.
Thank you. Cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com. I'm delighted to be broadcasting this hour with Doug Hagmann of the Hagmann Report, HagmannReport.com. Heard you can get to it through the website, HagmannReport.com, HagMann Report.com. It airs live 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. Doug Hagmann, welcome.
Sir, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the time and really appreciate your program.
Well, thank you so much. Doug, on your website, there is a really interesting report about TWA Flight 800. And for those who may remember, let me just share this with you. There's some conspiracy theories about this Trans World Airlines Flight 800, known as TWA 800, that crashed. And I'm looking at my notes of when did it crash? 8:31 p.m., July 17, 1996, about 12 minutes after takeoff from JFK International Airport. And the flight was on a Boeing 747, leaving New York, flying to Rome with a stopover in Paris, France. 12 minutes after takeoff, there was an explosion. The 230 on board all died. Doug, you talked about that on your broadcast. Can you tell us what your thoughts are on that? And I'd like to share something that I learned as well.
Sure, Vince. And to the listeners out there, you're exactly right. It was July 17th, 1996. 230 souls aboard, all perished. You're looking at a commercial aircraft 12 miles out of East Mauritius, New York. That's off of Long Island, and you're dead on 8:31 p.m., 12 minutes after takeoff. Indeed, the plane came out of the sky, and the NTSB accident investigators from there, they actually turned over the investigation. I'm really kind of making a lot of information, just summarizing a lot of information, but they turned over the investigation essentially to the FBI and the CIA. It's been unprecedented before this time, ever for an independent body, the NTSB, turning over an investigation to the CIA and FBI. It's without precedent. If there was indeed a mechanical issue, that would have never happened, but nonetheless it did. And I've found this out through my own investigative research, 30 years as an investigator. However, the bulk of the research, the bulk of the investigative findings has come from a gentleman that has become a good friend, and I respect him as an investigative journalist himself, and that's Jack Cashel, the author of TWA 800, a number of books and a number of articles on that subject. In fact, I'd recommend everyone grab a copy of his latest TWA 800, The Crash, The Cover-Up, and The Conspiracy, because all three elements exist within that incident. But the relevance of this crash, just very quickly, the relevance today to what happened some 20 years ago has never been more important for this particular cover-up, the conspiracy behind the cover-up, the elements, the individuals, the entities involved in this cover-up are the same players, even down to Hillary Clinton, as they are today. The same lies, the same liars, the same story. The same template is being used to cover up things like Hillary's real the physical status, what is really taking place, now bringing us to the point of constitutional crisis. But to circle back around, the incident with respect to TWA 800 is so egregious, so in your face, that we were told to believe that this aircraft, through a CIA operational analysis offered to the public, this aircraft actually climbed in altitude after some sort of catastrophic mechanical failure, when in fact all evidence that has been suppressed, manipulated, massaged, suggests that it was struck by not just one, but perhaps more than likely two missiles. But no one, and I want to stress this, no one is ascribing blame. No one knows where those missiles came from. If they were, if they were an artifact of exercises, military exercises, our side off the coast, because there were, or if it was from a terrorist attack. Really, that's secondary to the point that this incident really, when you deconstruct what happened, it tells everybody that there is literally a smoking missile here, or a huge cover-up and conspiracy to commit a cover-up that rises, in my view, to the level of a criminal conspiracy and a criminal element. I don't know if that answers your question, but I try to be as succinct as possible.
Yeah. Well, Doug, I was traveling in my coming back from a consulting agreement at one of the school systems, and it's about a 45-minute trip from my farm in Virginia to the consulting location at a school system. And it was a regular trip that I made many times a week. And I was traveling at that time in rural Virginia, and I was listening to AM talk radio. And Curtis Sliwa was the talk show host on air at that time. And he took a call, and the call came in from a man who was absolutely frantic. He said, Curtis, he was stuttering, stammering. A plane just blew up. A missile went from the ground or from the water, and it just blew up the plane. And Curtis was like, well, I haven't heard anything about that on the AP wire. And the guy was absolutely insistent that a missile was launched. An eyewitness live of a missile launch going up and taking this plane out, causing the plane to explode in air. And so Curtis Sliwa said, all right, let's go to a commercial break, and let me see if I can find something on the newswire. So he went to a break, and he came back a couple minutes later. He said, "There's nothing there. There's nothing on the newswire about this happening." So is this guy kidding that called, or is this a hoax, or what is this? And the caller said, no, it couldn't possibly be. It just happened, seconds ago, or a moment ago. And so Curtis said, all right, let's clear the lines, and let's take some calls and see if there are any others in New York City and the surrounding area that have seen this. Give us a call, and we'll put you on the air. Call after call after call came in, and everyone said the same thing. A missile went up, and the aircraft exploded. Now, Curtis Sliwa was known to be on the air a lot, and he would sleep in his cubicle. And, it finally came out later that, how come he's on late at night, he's on early in the morning, he's on midday, he's filling in for anybody who needed a fill-in host. He was there all the time. Now, so he was on, and he was taking these calls that described this missile, this explosion, from these witnesses, all saying the same thing, before the AP wire had the news. And then the next morning, Curtis was on, and I tuned in to listen to him, and there was no discussion of it. It was like it never happened. How can that be that all these witnesses who had this massive story, it disappeared by the next morning? So the only conclusion that I could come to, Doug Hagmann, is that someone talked to him and said, you absolutely positively will not discuss this.
Yeah.
Or else.
Well, there were so many witnesses. We're looking at 244 eyewitnesses, reliable eyewitnesses at the bare minimum. At the bare minimum. Now, I do know that Jack Cashel, I think, is interviewed that many at least, but it's been documented that have seen. We're talking reliable eyewitnesses that can be described as seeing something arising from the horizon to the plane itself. And one witness in particular, a very strong eyewitness, vetted, verified. This is a woman who who gave a statement to the FBI, described what she saw as a streak coming from the horizon to the plane, and engaging in what she called an upside-down Nike swoosh, where the whatever it was coming from the ground hit the plane and destroyed the plane. The destruction of the plane occurred afterwards. Now, the reason I mention this above all others, this one witness, is because once the FBI got her statement, that was buried, that was prevented from ever seeing the light of day. But even worse, during a reinvestigation of the TWA 800 incident, she was reportedly interviewed a second time, and the 302, which is the form used by the FBI for witness statements. When you talk to the FBI, for example, everything that you say is put down in Form 302. Well, her second interview consisted of a 302 that was totally opposite of the initial statement. The reason I mention this, because this to me is Exhibit A in the courtroom of what's taking place here. She was never re-interviewed. That 302 was manufactured out of whole cloth. That is Exhibit A to the lies, to what we're seeing here, the management, the mitigation of potential damage to this rogue administration back in the 90s.
Doug Hagmann.
And that's, by the way, that's the way. That is the way how all of this was covered up.
That's Doug Hagmann's with us. HagmannReport.com, HAGMANN report.com. You can hear it 7 to 10 Eastern Time, 7 to 10 p.m., Monday through Friday. So, Doug, Curtis Lewa, the broadcaster that I was talking about on AM radio in New York City on a 50,000-watt station, was the founder of the Guardian Angels. So he was around town, and his Guardian Angel volunteers were patrolling the city streets and protecting the villagers from, the bad guys, sure. Doing the protecting and serving that guys in maybe blue should be doing. But anyway, he was on the air a couple years later, and I was taking some calls, and a caller called in about what happened after being interviewed by the FBI. And this caller said that the FBI said, no. What you saw, well, the mind plays tricks on us. And what you saw was not a missile going up. It was the wreckage coming down. It was just the opposite. So that fiery debris coming down, you thought was a missile going up. And that witness was not the only witness that said that that's what they were told by the FBI, that they were mistaken. What they saw was not what they saw. What they saw was, or what the FBI said was, no, the mind plays tricks on us. Have you heard that as well?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. And, apply it to today, Vince. And this is where it gets really insidious because, here we are as an American people. We're not stupid, okay? The powers that be believe that we are stupid. And, having been an investigator for 30 years, I've talked to witnesses about different things. And, I do know witnesses get it wrong. I do know that certain things, I mean, if you have multiple witnesses, you're going to have multiple accounts of what was seen. However, there's a consistent thread that runs through that witness accounting. But the bottom line here is the FBI, the CIA at that time, and even to today, but more importantly, the people in power believe all of us are just stupid. That we're, it's almost like raising a teenager. Anyone who's raised a teenager knows that the teenager, regardless of how good that teenager might be, is going to attempt to game you, say, "Oh, that didn't happen," or regardless of the incident. But what we're seeing here is we are being treated as a populace as if we are totally, absolutely a bunch of morons. That what we're seeing is not really, that's really not what we're seeing. For example, Hillary Clinton, her health issues, the coughing fits, the collapse, and I mean collapse on 9/11, her own 9/11. Well, that's because of pneumonia. Okay, well, what's, really pneumonia? That's going to cause that level? Or she was dehydrated. See, what we're seeing is the exposing of the playbook of the people in power and the running roughshod over the average Americans. And by the way, Vince, I got to tell you, most Americans, especially the ones I talk to, are sick and tired of being lied to and treated like we're a bunch of idiots, that we're a bunch of morons. And it's really insulting to most people of rational sensibilities to be lied to be gamed, and to expect and to have them expect that we should believe, or to say, well, you can't believe your lying eyes. Come on, I know what I saw, and you're not going to change it, no matter how hard you try. Now, factoring in, of course, the margin of error with eyewitnesses, whether it's TWA 800 or regardless of the situation, we have to factor that in. But when it becomes so egregious that it rises to the level of insanity, it boggles the mind. And I'm reminded of a quote from Thomas Jefferson, who said, "If a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects what never was and never will be." And that's kind of where we're at today.
Yeah, our system is based on having an educated people and an informed people, and actually, I don't think for the most part we are. Some of us think we are. Some of us watch the mainstream media and get brainwashed and might believe some of this Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. The lies surrounding it. When we come back, Doug Hagmann, let's talk about if we know who was on Flight 800 and were they to be killed. So, years ago, we thought that they'd never bomb a building to kill a person. There are too many people that, might be collateral damage to that bombing. But now we're seeing more and more reports of 50 people being killed in a bombing. This is becoming more and more mainstream news. So on July 17, 1996, departing from JFK International Airport with a stopover in an airport from flight to Rome with a stopover in Paris, France, 230 people were killed. Now the question is, we have drone strikes, we have missile strikes, and lots of people are killed with all kinds of bombs, and there seems to be a lot of collateral damage when maybe just one person was the target of a planned execution by these defective people. Who was on the plane? Do we know?
Well, a good question, and I know people have looked at this. There were, 230 who perished. of course, 18 were the flight crew, and then you had people riding deadhead back to their respective locations. But, out of the 230 people, 13 countries, there were the passengers were from 13, and crew were from 13 different countries, from the United States to Belgium, Denmark, France, and so on. It's interesting to note that, we looked at the passenger manifest. The passenger manifest was published in a couple of different publications. So, were there any people on board, I think is your question, that would warrant additional scrutiny? Well, okay, aside from the 16 members of the French club at a Pennsylvania high school and their 5 chaperones, the French hockey player, a French guitarist, an American composer, a couple of obviously significant people with significant jobs. You also had, for example, Charles Gray from Memphis, who had many ties to Arkansas. He was the chief operating officer of Midland Financial Group. You had William Story, the president and chief executive officer of National American Insurance Company of California. You had the CEO of Danielson Holding Corporation and a partner in the investment firm from Whitman, Heffernan, and Ryan and Company of Connecticut. It's interesting to see some, Charles Beatty, who was a senior systems engineer with the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Virginia. As we look at these names, as we look at these potential targets here, do any of them rise to the level of perhaps, would that be of significance in this incident? Having looked at this extensively, my gut reaction and my research or reaction after research tells me, no, not really. I mean, there's some interesting connections, but I don't think that would speak to motive or even opportunity in this case, unless, of course, you've got some insight that I don't know.
What I've heard and read in the past, and this was many, many years ago, was that there were 2 individuals that had information that would be extremely damaging to Bill Clinton that were on board. Now, I can't prove it. I don't know if I can find that information again, but that's what I heard and read many, many years ago. And that information was so damaging that that's the reason the plane was taken down. And I just did a quick search, and I typed in to a search engine, Clinton, deaths. And, one of the posts says 90 suspicious deaths of individuals close to Bill Clinton. And, you think about that. Who the heck would want to be close to the Clintons? It's a dangerous place to be. I certainly wouldn't want to be next to
Sure.
One of our instructors was a Walmart trainee for since high school years. For 20 years, he went to, we'll call it quote unquote Walmart University. He met Sam Walton. He met Hillary Clinton at the corporate headquarters there, and he said she's evil, and she was evil, decades ago. And when you look at the lies about her health, it seems like she really, truly is a congenital liar. Just can't stop lying about anything. And one of the most dangerous things that I'm thinking about is if she were to be selected as president by the Electoral College, certainly not by us, that would be probably the worst thing that could happen to the country at this time. I can't think of anything that would be worse than that, other than an asteroid hit or World War III. Do you think it's as dangerous as I do?
I do, but maybe coming at it from a different angle. I think we're being set up. Vince, as I look at the landscape, the political landscape, you've got Donald Trump coming out with both barrels, and without any type of manipulation of the polling data. Clearly, he's got a head of steam, and he's ahead. And I think that represents a threat. Whether or not it's actual, real, whether or not you believe in the man, it doesn't matter. It's what they believe. And I believe that they, meaning the powers, believe that he does represent a threat, kind of a dog off a chain, a rabid dog off of a chain. The way they look at Donald Trump, you don't know. It's unpredictable. Can he be controlled? Can he be corralled by the Washington, D.C. Luciferian power structure? And that's what I believe that they're afraid of. So they cannot afford, in my view anyway, they cannot afford to allow him to win if they can't control him. So having said that, who do they have up against them? Hillary Clinton. Now, I believe that she is extremely sick. I believe that it's rooted in neurological problems that they have known about, and I do believe that it was covered up. And I believe that the issue of pneumonia was, in fact, although it very well could be true, I think it directly speaks to a secondary cause, meaning that the pneumonia is a consequence of a neurological disorder, perhaps like Parkinson's or something to that extent. Now, having said all of that, the way I'm looking at this is we are walking dead headlong into a potential constitutional crisis, because here's the issue. And I've spoken to about a half a dozen constitutional scholars, attorneys, lawyers, and professors. And the possibilities, there's about 3 or 4 potential possibilities here. Should Hillary Clinton become or be decidedly unfit, impaired, or otherwise die? The question is, at what time does that happen? Does it happen very, very close to Election Day, November 8th, or does it happen after the election? Or does it happen in the run-up to election or on the day of? Well, when you look at the Constitution, it is anything but clear, and certainly there's no historical precedent, aside from maybe Horace Greeley back 200 years ago, that would suggest that there is anything, any easy remedy to fix this. So, looking at this from a bird's eye view, it's very possible that we could actually see a postponement, yes, a postponement of elections, however temporary, or a suspension of elections, of the general election, because the constitutional, what's contained in the Constitution is really murky, not clear. That's possible, or you could end up having a small group of individuals, meaning like a party of the DNC, small groups of people handpicking a replacement pursuant to obscure party rules. And this is spelled out, and I found this and I was directed to this treatise, if you will, by a law professor, now author, back in 1994. Oddly enough, it's contained in the 1994 edition of the Yale Law Review, who spells out the potential problems associated with what we're seeing take place right today. So I believe, in a nutshell, I believe that what we're seeing today is the exploitation of Hillary Clinton to such an extent that her election, or Trump election, selection, if you will, whatever, voting in, the legitimacy of our elections will be called into question in some way, shape, or form, to such an extent that if Trump is elected, his leadership and his election will be questioned at the very best. I mean, at best, that's what's going to happen. At worst, we could potentially see a postponement of the elections or even a suspension of the elections, because the Constitution, even though we've got the 33rd Amendment, or the 12th Amendment, and other amendments as well to address this, it is still not clear if a candidate drops out or becomes, impaired, unable to serve, if that candidate drops out just right before the meeting of the Electoral College. And by the way, Vince, to explain this to the average person, it's so difficult, because a person's got to have at least a rudimentary understanding of the Electoral College when they meet. The fact that it's nestled into the states as opposed to a federal deal. So you've got to have an understanding of that. And people in America today just don't have that level of understanding. They missed poli-sci class or civics class, or they slept through it, or they yawned, all through it. So what we're seeing is, in my view, we're being set up for a constitutional crisis designed to challenge the legitimacy of a Trump win, or usher in a candidate of their own selection.
Doug Hagmann, in the circles in which I travel, I haven't met a single person who is pro-Hillary Clinton. Not one person. As a matter of fact, they despise her. They despise her so much that they can't understand why she has any traction whatsoever based on the body count, based on Bill's zipper problems, based on the affairs, all the things that the Clintons have done, which we're all told, no, that's bad behavior. You just don't do those things. You don't lie, cheat, steal, accept bribes, sell influence, sell political office, sell the White House, sell the Lincoln bedroom. You just don't do those things. You don't have affairs in the governor's limousine and in the McDonald's parking lot with the manager of McDonald's. That came from Larry Nichols. You don't do those things, and I can't understand how she has any traction whatsoever. We'll be right back. Class, this weekend, arcade gun shows. Lexington, Kentucky, Atlanta, Georgia, Denver, Colorado. That's September 17th, 2016. Lexington, Kentucky, Atlanta, Georgia, Denver, Colorado. And October 1 and 2, arcade prepper shows at the Kansas City Expo Center, Kansas City, Missouri. Rick Miller's going to be there, Matt Stein, Craig Douglas, Storm and Norman Cantwell, and I'll be there as well. And you can see us there. It'll be great to spend some time with you one-on-one, and maybe we can even have dinner. So that's October 1 and 2 at the Arcade Prepper Shows, Kansas City Expo Center, Kansas City, Missouri. Doug Hagmann, what should we be concerned with right now? What news events pique your interest that we should be watching very carefully, and why?
Wow, a great question, especially in the amid of all of the white noise that's out there. You know, if I could just say one thing, I would recommend people look at the bigger picture of things and understand how each headline that's relevant to today, how it fits into the bigger picture, because we have a lot of people out there looking at the minutia, which is fine. I mean, we have to keep track of things, but we have to see and understand that the globalists who are in power, as opposed to, you know, the nationalists, we'll say, or the people who hold the power, we have to understand what their long-term objectives are. And in so doing, we have to understand that everything that we see is being managed, manipulated, or spun in such a way that we're being gamed every day. So the news headlines, for example, you've got Hillary Clinton. Everyone's focused on the video. Oh, what's wrong with her? Well, that's fine. Go ahead and focus on that, but also look at the bigger picture. How will this impact the larger picture, and that is the elections? Will her, let's say she remains in the running and is propped up by her facilitators, covered by the media. Let's say she loses to Donald Trump. We have to be thinking 2 and 3 steps ahead of our adversaries, the people who want to destroy this country, because I do believe something like that will cast a doubt on the legitimacy of a Trump victory. So thinking ahead from there, what will happen? What's going to be the collateral effect of that? Well, when you look at it, it's going to be basically a takedown of our country from within. Everything that we're seeing today, Vince, I believe, is an attempt to neutralize or to, even worse, take down the United States. So anything that's related to the petrodollar, to the elections, to the legitimacy of the elections, to be more precise, to global warfare. Because at the end of the day, there's 3 things I believe that are important. Number one, or that are relevant to the globalists. They need to destroy our economy. They need to destroy our culture, and that they're doing so through the infusion of these illegal aliens, 11,000 and change from Syria, 15% more than Obama hoped for. And most of them, 99.4, I think, percent, are Muslims who will fail to assimilate into our society. It's kind of what Michael Savage always says: borders, language, and culture. All 3 are under assault, and any headline that is involved in borders, language, culture, the the keeping of our republic alive it should be paramount. So while people are looking for this big, huge bang, some big thing on the horizon to take place, no, it's the little things that we have to keep our eyes on, and the totality in the aggregate. What do they say? And watch the trends, because there it is. It's the takedown of the United States from within without a shot being fired.
Very quick answer question, please. Do you see a civil war or revolution coming our way?
I see it as a very distinct possibility, and that's what they're hoping for.
Yeah. Yep. Doug Hagmann, thank you so much for being with us today. HagmannReport.com. HagmannReport.com. And there's a link on the website, USA Prepares. Doug, thank you so much for being with us today in class and teaching us, sharing your expertise and knowledge and experience. That's above all,
you,
honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.